Hello friends, welcome to CEC Live Lectures. Dear friends, today in this session we are going to talk on another important topic in the area of finance. And friends, our area of discussion is very important. We are going to discuss on prospect theory and loss aversions. And for the discussion on the topic, we have with us in our studios our expert, and the subject expert is Dr. Divya Verma-Ghakkar. Dr. Divya Verma-Ghakkar is Assistant Professor in School of Management Studies, Guru Gobind Singh in the Pristha University. Dr. Ghakkar has immense experience, and through her, our previous session was also prolific, and today also we believe that we are going to get in-depth knowledge on the topic. Friends, if you wish to ask questions from Dr. Divya Verma-Ghakkar on today's topic, then do call us through a toll-free number. Our number is 1-800-110-430. I repeat, our number is 1-800-110-430. All dear friends are requested to call in the last 10 minutes of the lecture, so that first you could have an insight into today's topic. And yes, of course, in the last 10 minutes we promise to give answers to your questions, but your questions should be relevant to the topic only. Now I would like to welcome our guest, Dr. Divya Verma-Ghakkar, once again. Hello ma'am, welcome to the lecture.
Thank you so much. Dear friends, last time we were discussing on behavioral finance, and today also continuing with the same topics relevant to behavioral finance, we'll talk about prospect theory. Daniel Kahneman, who got Nobel Prize in 2002, gave prospect theory in the area of behavioral finance. In his book Thinking Fast and Slow, Daniel Kahneman has talked about that our brain has two systems. He has talked about two systems of the brain, system 1 and system 2. System 1 of the brain is intuitive, is fast brain, is based on heuristics. It takes automatic decisions. It is highly creative. For example, whenever you are asked what is 2 plus 2, a quick answer comes to your mind. So that is where system 1 is working. And system 2 is that part of the brain which is slow brain, which is conscious, which takes logical decisions, which make calculations, do analysis, is logical. And system 2 part of the brain, for example, if somebody asks 17 multiplied by 24, so something comes in our mind. There are a lot of things which we think about it, that we don't want to answer this question, or I have to make the calculation, or your mind start making the calculation, but it will not be as quick as 2 plus 2. So that is system 2 part of the brain which works. System 1, when it works, it is not in our control, but system 2 part of the brain, when it is working, it is more logical, and whatever logical decision making we do, that is through the system 2 part of the brain. So that is what Daniel Kahneman has explained in his book Thinking Fast and Slow. And in his book only he has talked about the prospect theory. So that is what we are going to discuss today. The prospect theory is derived from the expected utility theory, because expected utility theory had certain criticism that man is not rational man. As we discussed previously, that expected utility theory or all financial models, they talk about that man is a rational man, man is economic man, and he takes logical decisions. But practically in real life, man is irrational and can take irrational decisions. So that is wherein the prospect theory comes into picture, and we are going to discuss about it. So expected utility theory explains how decisions are made based on coherently weighing outcomes of action by their probabilities. Those outcomes which give more utility are chosen by the decision maker. The utility curve do not follow a straight line, and different people can have different utility. So prospect theory has similarity to the previous models, as it also assumes that shape of the curve is similar for everyone, and the curve is not a straight line, and different people can have different utility curves. Prospect theory explains how individuals make a choice between probabilistic alternatives where risk is involved, and the probability of different outcomes is unknown. This theory was formulated in 1979 and further developed in 1992 by Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman. This theory adds insights that utility curves differ in domains of gain, from those in domains of loss. The shape of value curve is similar across individuals. There is a common pattern of choice or decision making which we can see in the prospect theory. Prospect theory is divided into two stages: editing phase, also known as framing phase, and evaluation phase. Let's talk about the basic framework of prospect theory. So, basically prospect theory assumes that man is not rational, and based on the kind of prospects he see or the alternatives available, he decides that whether he is going to be a risk seeker or a risk taker or a risk averse. So, let's take an example. A prospect is a gamble where a person will have probability PR of obtaining X and a probability of 1 minus PR of obtaining Y alternative. And a riskless prospect can be shown as Px. For example, the probability, there is 25% probability of winning 1000 rupees shows a prospect that a person will have a chance of 25% chance to gain 1000. So, there are three basic aspects of prospect theory which we are going to discuss here. Aspect number 1, depending upon the nature of prospect, people exhibit risk aversion or risk seeking attitude. So, every person has the risk seeker or risk averse attitude, and depending upon which situation they are put into, they decide that whether they have to be risk seeker or risk averse. For example, one person is given two decisions to be taken. There are two scenarios available. One, he has to choose between P1. P1 alternative says that he can get 2500 rupees, and P2 alternative says that he has got 25% chance of winning rupees 9000. In scenario 2, he has a choice between choosing P3 and P4, wherein P3 is a loss of 7500 rupees and P4 is 75% chance of losing rupees 9000. Now, for this first problem, which is consistent with risk aversion, 84% of the respondents chose P1, that is a sure shot gain of rupees 2500 in scenario 1 with respect to the 25% chances of winning rupees 9000. In scenario 2, it is consistent with risk seeking, that is 87% of people chose P4 option, where P4 option was 75% chance of losing rupees 9000. Subject to the available prospects or alternatives, prospect theory takes into account deviations in the risk attitude of people. Second aspect, people value their prospect of gains or losses in relation to a reference point. Generally, this reference point begins with status quo. A very important concept Daniel Kahneman has talked about in prospect theory, that it is reference dependent model. So, every person has a status quo and nobody wants to leave their status quo. Whatever income or resources we have at any point of time, or whatever level we are starting with, that becomes our status quo. And from that status quo, how up or down we can go depends from situation to situation and alternative to alternative, and whether we will be risk seeker or a risk taker or a risk averse person in that scenario. It depends upon from where we are starting. So, every person can have different status quo, every person can start from a different level of income or career or decision making level. So, let us take another example. There are two scenarios. Scenario number 1, let us assume you are richer by 3000 rupees as compared to today, and then you are given two alternatives. You already have 3000 rupees and two alternatives are given. Alternative P5 says that you will get sure shot rupees 1000, and P6 alternative is that there is 50% chance of winning rupees 2000. Which one will you choose? One option wherein you already have 3000 rupees and somebody asks you that you will get one more 1000 rupees sure shot. So, will you choose that, or you will choose option number 6, which says that you have 50% chance of winning 2000 rupees. 72% of the respondents have chosen P5, that is a sure shot gain of rupees 1000. So, that means you will be richer by 1000 rupees. So, your total wealth becomes 4000. So, instead of choosing option 6. So, there you become risk averse. And there is second scenario. Let us say you are richer by rupees 5000, you have 5000 rupees more as compared to today. Then you are given two options, P7 and P8. P7 option says that you will lose rupees 1000, so there will be a loss of 1000, sure shot loss, or choose option 8, which gives you 50% probability of incurring a loss of rupees 2000. Which of the two options, P7 or P8, you will choose? So, in this case, it was found that 64% of the people have chosen P8. That means, while incurring losses or whenever there is a prospect of incurring losses, we try to become risk averse, we try to become risk seeker. That is why we chose P8. So, risk attitude is not same across all type of gains or losses which can happen, but it depends upon the change in wealth rather than the level that matters to people. So, that means whatever is your status quo, if you are richer by some little amount of money, then your decision making will be different, but if you are at a very high level, then maybe a particular decision or two alternatives may appear to be risk, may appear you to take more risk or less risk. Third aspect, key aspect of prospect theory is people are averse to losses, as losses loom larger than gains. So, people do not want to take risk. Everybody wants to avoid risk and loss, because if there is a loss, so we feel more hurt or we feel more sad of any loss as compared to any gain which we see in our life. For example, explain the value of X which will make investor indifferent between P9, that is status quo, and P10, that is 50% chance of losing 250. P9 option is status quo. The average response in one experiment was 610, that is for a fair gamble where the loss is 50% chance of the loss is 250, a person requires a gain of 610. This demonstrates that level of gain should be more than 2 times the absolute value of loss in order to make the two prospects indifferent. Thus, the term loss aversion means that for most people, losses loom larger than gains as per the observations. Now, again we will take another example. There are two scenarios. Let us first talk about scenario 1. Which option will you choose? There is 85% chance to win rupees 10,000. Option 1. Option 2 is there is sure gain of rupees 8,500. Which one anybody will choose? So, we see that most of the people will prefer option B, where there is a sure gain of 8,500. Why? Because people don't, when they are gaining money, people don't want to take risk, they are risk averse. Let us take another scenario. There is option number C, which shows 100% chance of losing 8,500 rupees, and 85 option D, which says 85% chance of losing rupees 10,000. Although the payoff will remain the same, if there is 100% chance of losing 8,500, it means you will lose 8,500, and 85% chance of losing rupees 10,000 means you will lose 8,500 only. Both the options give you the same answer, but if you give this statement and ask anyone that what will you choose, or you just think that what will you choose, 100% chance of losing 8,500 rupees or 85% chance of losing rupees 10,000. Most of the people chose D option because of loss aversion, because when it comes to getting losses, people become risk takers. Another example, all of us have seen that whenever a race takes place, so there is first, second and third rank position. So, whenever a in a race, winners are declared. There is a gold medalist who is happy, bronze medalist is usually very happy, but silver medalists are not very happy or are sad. Why? The reason is reference point. Why a silver medalist is not happy even after winning the silver medal, but a bronze medalist you will find that is very happy, just because a silver medalist had an opinion about himself that he will win the gold medal. But just because he missed that gold medal and he has reached to the level of silver medal, so his reference point was winning that gold which he could not win. So because of that, he is not that happy as you will find that the bronze medalist is. Now why this bronze medalist is always more happy than the silver medalist? Because for the bronze medalist, if he would have come on the 4th place, he would not have won anything. So that is why it usually we have seen that bronze medalists are more happier whenever they win as compared to the silver medalist, because of the reference point. The reference point for the bronze medalist is coming on ranked 4th, where he would not have got any prize, and for the silver medalist the reference point was winning that gold which he just missed. So that is why they will not be as happy, the silver medalist will not be as happy as the bronze medalist. Now what are the applications of prospect theory? This theory is used in measuring risk, the utility under risk. It helps us understand the concept of probability weighing for gains and losses. It helps in studying the loss aversion tendency of investors to explain the violation of some of the properties of expected utility theory, and it also explains how investors take decisions. Prospect theory has also been criticized. Prospect theory follows that probabilities can be objectively defined using decision weights, but for identifying those objective probabilities, it becomes difficult to know the value of these probabilities in various situations like gambling. It is very difficult to assign probability and then assigning some weights. So these are some of the limitations of prospect theory. So prospect theory has two phases before a decision has to be taken. Editing phase, also known as the framing phase or framing effect. Now what is framing effect? Framing effect refers to the way in which a choice can be affected by the order or manner in which it is presented to the decision maker. So the way we present a situation or a scenario or a alternative to someone, that depends upon how he is going to take a decision on it. In some situation, even the options are not known. So decision maker has to apply his creativity or his mind while determining and constructing those options. So depending upon whatever is our past experience, whatever is our attitude, that will help us frame that what kind of decisions or alternatives are possible, and based on those understanding, our understanding of those alternatives, we take a decision. How does framing effect operates? Kahneman and Tversky have explained framing as framing is controlled by the manner in which choice problem is presented as well as by norms, habits and expectations of decision makers. Framing affects the editing phase of any decision problem which comes to us through processes like first step is segregation. First of all, we identify the factors which seem most relevant to the problem. Acceptance. Decision maker usually accept the way problem is presented. They do not recast it. Coding. Categorizing outcomes as gain or loss. Combination. Adding together likelihood of choices to present identical outcomes. And cancellation, that is discounting, carried out in evaluating choices that carry similar outcomes. In framing effect, if there are two events, individuals can see them as combined event or see them as separate events. Like if an investor make two bets and win one and loses other, he has two options. Either he separate the two events and feel happy when he wins and sad when he loses, or he can combine the outcomes and can have a mixed feeling. So, combine the two outcome and see net payoff. If net payoff is positive, then investor feels happy. Separating the two bets, if there is a net loss, this make him disappointed for once but happy in the other situation. The decisions tend to vary drastically on how the problems are framed in terms of losses or gain. This occurred due to loss aversion. Also, a frame is affected by the presentations, person's perception of the question and his personal characteristics. Second stage is evaluation phase. In the evaluation phase, there are two functions, value function and weighing function. In case of value function, it is defined in terms of gains or losses to a reference point. So, first of all, what is the starting point for any individual from where he is taking up his decision, that is very important. And then he will determine that how much value he is going to get in the gain or loss. So, this value function or the prospect decision making utility curve which we make is a S-shaped curve. This S-shaped curve shows that it is convex below the reference point and concave above it. This curve is more sensitive to the changes near the origin as compared to far from it. It also means that people are risk averse in times of gain and risk seeker in situations of loss, so domain do affect the risk propensity. And asymmetric nature of this value curve, it is steeper in domain of loss rather than in gain. It is because of loss aversion. So, if you lose rupees 100, it will hurt you more rather than the happiness of winning rupees 100. So, we can explain it with the help of this graph, where on the x axis we have loss and gain and on the y axis we have the value we have earned or we will get from this loss of gain. As I have already explained that the prospect theory utility curve is a S-shaped curve, and in the quadrant where we have gains and value together, we can see that this curve is a convex, is a concave curve. You can see it here that this is a concave curve where we are gaining, and this curve becomes convex when we are into losses. Why do this happen? Because depending upon the outcome, the value of gain which we earn at any point of time is less as compared to the value of loss, even if the amount of loss is the same. So, value of gain and value of loss, even if they are same, the amount of gain or loss, even if it is same, but the value which we give to the gain is less as compared to the value of loss. That is why you can see that this curve in the top quadrant where it is concave is less steeper as compared to when it is convex in the loss quadrant. So, this shows that any investor can be a risk averse investor or can be a risk seeker investor depending upon whether he is having gains or losses. So, in situation of gain, people become risk averse. In situation of losses, people become risk seeker. As of now, we will stop here and we will discuss about prospect theory in a short while.
With this, thank you so very much for giving us this session. Friends, you are requested to be with us as we are back after a short break. Thank you. Hello friends, welcome back to this session. Friends, as you know that today we are talking on prospect theory, and the another topic is loss aversion. So first we are going to continue further where we left in our previous session, and yes, of course, after finishing it, that is a prospect theory, we are going to talk on loss aversion. And for the discussion on the topic, we have with us in our studios Dr. Divya Verma Gakkar. She is assistant professor in Guru Gobind Singh Indraprasth University. Friends, if you wish to ask questions from Dr. Gakkar on today's topic, do call us through our toll-free number. Our number is 1-800-110-430. I repeat, our number is 1-800-110-430. Now, I would like to welcome our guest, Dr. Divya Verma Gakkar. Hello, ma'am. Welcome to the session.
Thank you so much. So, friends, we were talking about prospect theory, and continuing with that, just a recap of what we have discussed till now. Prospect theory assumes that investor is irrational, and investor do follow a utility curve, but the utility curve for an investor is not like the diminishing marginal utility of expected utility theory, but it goes like a S-shaped curve. In this S-shaped curve, if we on a 4-quadrant or on some axis, if we plot it, where on x-axis we have the outcome, that is the gain or a loss, on right hand side we have the gain, and on left hand side we have loss, and on the y-axis we have the value. So, whenever there is a gain which comes, so the investor with any outcome, let's say if you get a profit of 100 rupees, and with that 100 rupees profit, how much value do you give yourself or give to that winning of 100 rupees to yourself, will draw this curve as a concave curve. And in case you lose rupees 100, you will find that on this S-shaped curve which goes in the loss quadrant, it goes more steeper than the gain quadrant. So, in the gain quadrant, the curve is concave. In the loss quadrant, the curve is convex, which also shows that whenever we are gaining money, the investor becomes risk averse, and whenever we are losing money, we become risk seekers or risk takers, because it is already a loss situation. So, we trend to be more risk taker in a loss situation. Second property of this is that this S-shaped curve is less steeper in the gain quadrant, but is more steeper in the loss quadrant, which explains this loss aversion theory, which says that we feel more hurt or we feel more sad if we lose rupees 100 as compared to if we earn a profit of rupees 100. So, we will feel the dissatisfaction or the amount of loss will have more reduction in our value or our satisfaction, or we will feel more hurt when we lose money. So, that is why this S-shaped curve is steep in the loss section. So, in this value function, we came out with 3 observations which explain the characteristics of this value function, that people are risk averse in the positive domain, and the value function in the positive domain is concave in shape, while people are risk seeking in the negative domain, and value function is convex in the negative domain. The theory makes decision by focusing on gains and losses only. Thus, value function does not study wealth, but it studies the changes in wealth. How much our wealth from the status quo has gone up or has gone down will decide that whether we will be giving it more, will be having loss aversion, or will give more value to these losses, or will be risk seeker or risk averse. And last but not the least, people dislike losses, hence the value function will be more steeper for losses than gains, which are shown in this figure. So, people like gains more, it gives you more utility, but if you incur a loss, people hate losses more than the gains. So, that is why the utility dissatisfaction or the loss of utility which we derive when we incur a loss is much more than with the same amount of money if we gain. Next comes the weighing function. In weighing function, each outcome is given decision weights, and these are not similar to the probabilities assigned, as these are not taken from the rational choice. So, decision weights are basically derived assessment of how people arrive at sense of likelihood. So, decision weight which somebody will allot to every outcome he will get depends upon his personal choice, depends upon his reference point, depends upon his status quo, depends upon his ambiguity, depends upon his attitude and all those stuff. So, events which are certain or impossible usually receive higher weights than other events, thus editing phase comes into play. So, while framing the problem or while framing the alternatives, how much what kind of weightage we have given to those options, that decides that whether we will give more weight to a situation or an alternative or less weight to an alternative. Low probabilities are overweighted while high and medium probability are subjectively underweighted. Something which is unlikely to happen has more impact on our decision making. Let us take an example of lottery and insurance. In lottery, people are willing to take sure loss for non-existent change of huge gain. So, when we apply for a lottery or when we invest money in a lottery, it is just a gamble. We are investing our money in something that there will be huge gain which may happen, and the chances of happening it are very, very low. But at that point of time we become a risk seeker when the probability of the gain is low. And in insurance, as we all understand that we buy insurance for avoiding any future unforeseen circumstance or any future losses. So, for that we want to invest money today and buy an insurance for a very rare chance of something wrong happening to us in future. So, that is why when we are we are predicting a very bleak or very low chance of happening something unusual or some loss to us in future, we are ready to invest money for it today. So, in insurance, people are willing to take sure loss in present in order to prevent small chance of future by losses. So, people are risk averse in losses when probability of loss is small. As per prospect theory, people are giving overweight and attention to small probability of potential huge gains, that is in lottery, or huge loss like losing house on fire. Let us take another example that there are two choices. There is scenario 1 where people are asked to choose between P15, option 15, which shows 80% chance of winning rupees 4,000, and P16 comes up with the option that there is 100% chance of winning 3,000. Which one will you choose? So, 80% of the respondents have chosen P16, that is sure shot gain of 3,000. There is second scenario which says that one can choose between P17 and P18. P17 has the probability 20% chance of winning rupees 4,000. P18 gives you a choice of winning 25% chance of winning rupees 3,000. So, 65% as per the Kahneman and Tversky study have chosen P17. So, both the decisions are identical, except in scenario 2 probabilities are multiplied by 25%. It appears that lowering the probability from 100% to 25% has larger effect than lowering the probability from 80% to 20%. So, this problem is an example of common ratio effect. Explanation for this is certain outcomes are valued more than probable outcomes. This phenomena is known as certainty effect. Hence, slope of the weighing function in the neighborhood of certainty is relatively steep, that is, has a slope greater than 1. Similarly, if we look at another problem following the decision, so one scenario is that we have to choose between P19 and P20. where P19 gives us an option of 45% probability of earning 6,000 and P20 gives us an option of 90% probability of earning rupees 3,000. So, 86% people picked P20, where there is 90% chance of gaining or winning rupees 3,000, which shows risk aversion property. In decision 2, the option shows P21 and P22. P21 shows us 1% chance of earning 6,000 and P22 shows 1% chance of earning 3,000. Yet, people will choose P21, being risk seekers. We saw earlier that people overweight the low probabilities. The overweighing is greater for 0.001 probability than for 0.002 probability. It suggests that lower probabilities are overweighted the most, which implies that weighing function is relatively steep, that is, has a slope greater than 1 in the neighborhood of 0. So, if you see this weighing function graph, this figure depicts weighing function that is consistent with all above mentioned requirements. So, you can see this nature of this graph. So, this theory describes decision processes in 2 stages. Outcome of decision is ranked according to certain heuristics. A reference point is set and accordingly people decide which outcome can be considered equivalent. Outcomes that lie below the reference point are losses, while the greater outcomes are gains. Framing effects are elevated during editing phase. In the editing phase, coding, combination, segregation, simplification and detection of dominance is carried out. It helps to segregate isolation effect coming from consecutive probabilities. In the subsequent evaluation phase, value computation or utility computation is done on the basis of potential outcomes and their respective probabilities, and then chose the alternative having higher utility. Another important concept related to prospect theory is endowment effect. Endowment effect allows people to value things which they possess at a higher level as compared to valuing things which they do not possess at a lower level. Even if price of 2 commodities is same, you will find that if you have owned a particular asset, or if there is something which belongs to you, you would give it more value as compared to something which doesn't belong to you. So, that is what is endowment effect. So, whatever are our prized possessions or whatever belongs to us, we do not want to lose it even if we are paid the same price. So, standard economic theory suggests that any person's willingness to pay for an object should be equal to their willingness to accept compensation if they have to sell an object. But endowment theory suggests that it is not true, as people will consider things they possess as more valuable as compared to the price which they have paid to acquire it. This hypothesis is based on indifference curve and consumer theory. In behavioral economics, the endowment effect provides hypothesis that people put more value to things just because they are the owners. Endowment effect is also known as divestiture aversion. And coming on next to the loss aversion concept, which is related with this prospect theory, as we see that the concept of loss aversion, death, Norman Cousins have said, death is not the greatest loss of life. The greatest loss is what dies inside us while we live. Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky demonstrated the concept of loss aversion for the first time. Loss aversion defines people's preference of avoiding losses and acquiring gain. At any point of time in any scenario, we as human beings are loss averse. We want to avoid any loss making situation, any risk taking situations which come to our life. And if the amount of gain or loss which happens to us is the same, then also we will be more hurt, we will be more dissatisfied, and will be very sad with any loss of the same amount of money as compared to the profit which we have earned in the same amount of money. So, that is why this theory says, the concept of loss aversion says that losses will bring more dissatisfaction to an individual as compared to the gain of the same amount of money. The concept of loss aversion explains how much people are afraid of incurring losses. It is a human characteristics. When people compare losses and gain, it is seen that people dislike losing much more than winning. Hence, losses affect more than the gains, despite being the identical value in monetary terms. What is the impact of loss aversion? Immediate impact of loss aversion is risk aversion. We want to avoid the risk. For example, people usually dismiss an option if a potential loss threatens to their lifestyle. So, people do not want to take up those options which will threaten to their lifestyle because of this loss aversion. In a situation where gains and losses occur, when both are possible, people will be risk averse. Whenever there is a choice between a loss which is certain and a bigger loss with defined probability, people end up taking higher losses. When one purchases an item for consumption and if it has to be resold, people will be willing to sell it even at a more price than at which they bought it. This is known as endowment effect. There is a status quo bias that people will become conservative just because they do not want to lose their status quo position. So, endowment effect has a very important role to play in our loss aversion attitude, because whatever we already have, we try to we do not want to lose it. And if somebody asks us that, you give this thing to me, you resell it to me, we will charge more amount of money, or we will enhance its value if we have to resell it just because we possess it. That is endowment effect. And because of the status quo bias, that we do not want to lose the amount of wealth which we already have, because of that people tend to be conservative. They do not want to lose their position, their wealth position, their properties, their lifestyle. So, anything which comes in between their lifestyle or in their wealth position, they try to avoid such type of situation. When people have to take decision under uncertainty, there are two biases which affect them: possibility effect and certainty effect. Possibility effect gives more weight to highly unlikely event than they justify. Certainty effect gives less weight to events that are almost certain than what is actually justified. Due to loss aversion, people want to eliminate risk rather than reduce it. So, pain from loss is much more than pain from gain. Basic premise of loss aversion. Loss aversion refers to strong preference to avoid losses when compared with the desire of gain. So, it refers to feeling more unhappy by losing 10 bucks than feeling happy from gaining 10 bucks. Irrational decisions are made by us every day to avoid any losses. At times, we are not sure that what will be the returns of any action, but fear of losing something good motivates our action. Economists have identified loss aversion as key decision making factor. Mostly people take any action as they want to avoid losing money more as compared to acquiring money. How can you overcome fear of loss? So, first of all, whenever a situation comes, an alternative is available, you should ask yourself, what I am scared of losing. If it is security, comfort, money, control, companionship is something which is scaring you, or you are fearing that loss, so you can clear that by taking up this decision. Try to see the whole picture. While making a decision to act or not to act, one should try to identify that whether you are losing more by not doing something. One need to see the fear, beyond the fear, to make the right decision. Loss aversion can be used as motivation to follow what you really wanted. If you reward yourself every day for doing something good, it gives a psychological boost for continuing to do something. Motivation and intentions need to be assessed regularly. What makes us motivated few years ago does not motivate us now. So, we need to revise our intentions and we need to revise our motivation for doing something, and based on that our loss aversion decisions will be affected. Changing the way one sees that the loss is inevitable. Losses are inevitable in our life. We may have to lose relationship, loved one, places and many such things, but we have to survive such losses. Coming on to the model and types of loss aversion. The S-shaped curve of the prospect theory, which explains the utility or the value generated by an individual, is defined with this model, which explains that people are risk averse in the quadrant of gain and are risk seeker in the quadrant of losses. If the losses are large, people become more risk taker as compared to risk averse. We have an irrational tendency to be less willing to gamble with profits than with losses. It depends on three features: reference level dependence. Every individual see outcome from a reference point, also known as status quo. Gain and loss satiation. Any outcome, whether positive or negative, has diminishing return characteristics. The resultant value function is steeper for losses rather than for gains. Losing rupees 10,000 brings more pain than gaining rupees 10,000 gives pleasure. So, there are three concepts which are related to it. Endowment effect, that people would value something which they have rather than which they don't have. Connection based theory suggests that subjective feeling or connect one has with some object also defines people behavior that will decide that whether they will trade it or not. Myopic loss aversion was given by Benartzi and Thaler, who defines that it combines one's higher degree of sensitivity towards losses and attitude to frequently evaluate one's wealth. In the reference dependence model, people refer to their status quo or reference point to make a decision for choosing an alternative or not choosing an alternative. Another assumption of this model is that losses have greater impact on preferences than gain. Thus, we can see deformation of indifference curve about a reference point. As you can see here, that the pleasure or the utility or the value which you assign to the same amount of gain is, let us say, 2 points. With the same amount of money lost, you give the value of, let us say, minus 4 point. So, usually double the amount of gain will make you indifferent for any situation of loss which you see in your life. People experience losses very differently from gains, as shown in previous studies. People feel double the pain as compared to the pleasure with a gain. Hence, people tend to be loss averse, which affect their decision making. For example, we can take an example of a mayor who has a small town having a small population of 600 people, and he has to take a decision. There is an epidemic spread in the town, and there are two solutions which are available. First solution will guarantee saving 200 people. Second program will save all 600 people with 1/3 probability. Although the outcome of both the situations is the same, that only 200 people will be saved, which one will you choose as a mayor? So, most likely people choose the first program which guarantees saving 200 people. So, it is more sure over a risky gamble to choose out of the two alternatives which are given. To summarize all the topic which we have discussed today about prospect theory and loss aversion. So, basically we come out with certain points to remember. One, that prospect theory talks about the value or utility as the expected utility curve talks about. Expected utility curve says that utility is a diminishing, the utility is diminishing marginal utility, but prospect theory says that every person has a utility curve, but this utility curve is S-shaped curve. It is not always that people are risk averse. People can become risk seeker or risk averse depending upon what are the alternatives that are available to them. So, depending upon that, so people also decide. So, people are not rational. So, as per the expected utility theory, they are rational, but prospect theory assumes that people are irrational while taking any decision. They have endowment bias. That means people would value something which they possess more as compared to something which they do not have. So, the value of things which we own or which we have would be more valuable to us as compared to something which we do not have. Then there is a status quo bias which affects this prospect decision making for us. The status quo bias says that everybody wants to maintain their status quo. Whatever is your level of wealth, at whatever career point you are, you do not want to go down from that, which makes you conservative investor, which makes you a risk averse investor. So, if you do not want to lose your status quo, you do not want to incur any losses for the amount of existing wealth which you possess, you will tend to become conservative towards taking losses, and this also affects the loss aversion concept or the loss aversion attitude of people. Then there is a reference dependent model. So, one person will have a S-shaped curve, or you can say one person will be risk seeker or risk averse in a particular situation with the given alternatives, depends upon what is his reference point, at what level of wealth he belongs to, and at what level of wealth he wants to achieve. So, one person can have a different level of wealth, another person can have a different level of wealth. So, depending upon what is my reference point or your reference point or somebody else's reference point, that will determine that whether you will be risk seeker for a given alternative or you will be risk taker for a given alternative, or risk averse for a given alternative. So, based on these, then we also find that the amount of gain will give you X amount of pleasure, and if you want to make this amount of utility, or you want to make yourself indifferent about the situation, the X amount of wealth will give you, let us say, 1 gain. So, the amount of loss with the X amount of value which you have assigned to it will give you double the amount of loss, or you can say the displeasure or sadness or hurt feeling or that loss feeling you will have. So, any amount of, so twice the amount of loss will be equal to 1 level of gain which you incur for yourself. Based on that, we came up with the concept of loss aversion, which talks about the reference dependent model, which talks about certainty effect, which talks about status quo bias, and we try to summarize it based on that people will be risk seeker when they incur losses, rather than people will be risk averse whenever they are gaining money. With this, I would like to end this topic and like to so we will come up with the topic in the next session. We will talk about gambler fallacy, and we will talk about other important concepts of behavioral finance. Thank you.
With this note, thank you, ma'am. Thank you so very much for giving us this session. Friends, you are requested to write to us at info.cec@nic.in. This is the ID where you can post your questions as well as your feedback too. We are going to meet again soon. Till then, take care. Goodbye. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you once again.